Hello everyone, Nyonstar here, and I love reading. I've loved reading since I was little when my dad would read to me before bed. I've had a lot of favorite books from Peter Rabbit to Percy Jackson, but ever since the 8th grade, Pet Sematary has been my favorite book. Pet Sematary is a horror novel written by Stephen King, released in late 1983. My dad's a huge Stephen King fan, and I'd always seen Pet Sematary on the shelf. I desperately wanted to read it solely for the cat on the cover. In my gifted English class in 8th grade, my teacher decided to have us do reading logs every month. One month I was scrambling for something to read when my dad recommended I finally read Pet Sematary. So what is Pet Sematary about? Well, I'll tell you in the form of cartoon sock puppets. Why? Because this art style is very limiting, and I have a hard time drawing men. I would just give a summary, but I really want to talk about this book. Also, fair warning, this is an adult horror novel, so if you're a young kid, beat it. I'd also recommend reading it first, since I'm going to be spoiling the whole thing. Lewis Creed, fatherless doctor, is moving his family from Chicago to Ludlow, Maine, for his new job as head of the university medical services. His family consists of his wife Rachel Creed, née Goldman, his daughter Eileen, who goes by Ellie, who's 5 years old, his son Gage, who's 2, and Ellie's cat Winston Churchill, or Church for short. After contemplating abandoning his family and running away to Disney World, they arrive at their new home and Gage says his first word that isn't mom or dad. While scrambling for the house keys, Ellie cuts her knee, Gage gets stung by a bee, and Lewis is ready to tear his hair out when in walks Judd Crandall. He carefully picks the stinger out and offers a spare key to Lewis, asking him to come by later for a beer. Lou is weary at first, since Judd's wife Norma has rheumatoid arthritis, and Lewis doesn't want the visit to turn into a free medical exam. But after getting all their boxes and furniture from the moving truck, Lewis decides to go anyway. While they drink and talk, Judd tells him to be careful of the road between their houses, since big Orinco trucks barrel past all the time and kill local pets. He tells him about the trail to the pet cemetery that's behind the Creed's new house, and he should probably get Church fixed so he doesn't have the urge to cross the road, though Lewis is hesitant to do anything that would change Church and his Spitfire personality. Lewis gets prepared for his new job and bonds with Judd and Norma, even going so far as to check her over unprompted, disappointed he can't do more to help. Ellie starts kindergarten, and while Lewis is putting Gage to bed so he can listen to his daughter talk about her first day, he gets a horrible chill. Later that week, Judd takes the family hiking up the trail into the pet cemetery, graves aligned in a spiral. Since this is where kids would bury their pets, the sign is actually misspelled, hence the name of the book. Rachel is freaked out. Lewis speculates that maybe it's because her sister died from spinal meningitis when she was young, giving her a phobia of death. Judd points out a grave for his own dog Spot. They notice a deadfall, a big wall of fallen trees and branches, and Judd warns them that trying to climb it would be dangerous. The next day, Ellie gets really upset about the idea of Church dying, and says a quote I think about a lot. "I don't want Church to ever be dead. He's my cat. He's not God's cat. Let God have his own cat. Let God have all the damn old cats he wants and kill them all. Church is mine. You tell him, sweetheart." Lewis, whose uncle was a funeral director, tries to tell her it's just how things are, but she's still upset. Then Rachel gets upset at him saying death is natural and they get into a big fight. Judd and Norma tell him dead is dead, but Lewis decides to get Church neutered as a peace offering. Lewis goes in for his first day of work, being told that the ambulances are gone for repairs. This also introduces Steve Masterson, Lewis's friend. Unfortunately, his first day goes horribly wrong when they bring in Victor Pascal. He was hit by a car while jogging, his neck broken and brain poking out of his head. The ambulances aren't there, so Lewis just tries his best for the dying man. When he sends his team away for supplies, Victor speaks. He says the iconic lines, "It's not the real cemetery," and "The soil of a man's heart is stonier, Lewis." Lewis is understandably freaked out about this, but Victor dies before he can get any answers. When he gets home, Rachel is waiting for him, and has an explicit scene that made me very uncomfortable when I was 13. She also mentions their nanny, Missy Dandridge, who only actually shows up once, but she gets unusual focus in the original movie. When Louis sleeps, Victor is waiting for him and leads him to the Pet Sematary, Lou feeling everything, almost like it's not a dream. The deadfall is turned into a mound of moving bones, and Victor tells him not to break the barrier. Lou wakes up, and when he throws his blanket off, he sees his feet are covered in mud. That part gave me chills when I first read it. Louis looks into Victor, who's from New Jersey and shouldn't even know about the Pet Sematary, brushes off his experience as stress-induced sleepwalking, and church gets fixed. Flashing forward to Halloween, Louis takes Ellie over to Judd's house for trick-or-treating, and Norma faints, having cardiac arrest. Louis jumps in immediately to save her, and Norma gets taken to the hospital. When Lou visits, Norma is making a recovery, and Judd is very thankful. Around Thanksgiving, the family is going to visit Rachel's parents in Chicago, though Louis stays behind because of his bitter rivalry with Mr. Goldman. Judd calls him up and tells him there's a dead cat by the road, and when Lou goes over to check, sure enough it's Church. They decide to go to the Pet Sematary, and Judd goes one step farther and takes him over the deadfall. They trudge through Little God's swamp, and Judd warns him to ignore anything weird he might see or hear. They climb the 45 steps carved into a rock and enter the real cemetery, a flat-top mesa where the Micmacs used to bury their dead. Louis buries Church, and when they make it home, Louis asks, "Judd, what did we do tonight?" But Judd just replies, "Why, we buried your daughter's cat." He also drops the "soil of a man's heart is stonier" Louis line on Louis and leaves. The next morning, after an awkward call with Rachel and Ellie, he tries to visit Judd, but all he's greeted with is a note telling him not to question the previous night, and he'd understand everything later. Then Church comes back, matted with blood and bits of the garbage bag he was buried in around his whiskers. He walks around like a dazed corpse. Louis goes to hang out with Steve, and Church nearly trips him down the stairs, almost grinning. He visits Judd, who tells him the story of his own dog. His dog Spot had run through a fence and gotten really sick from an infection. Judd's dad puts him down. An old man Stanley B told him to meet him after midnight with the dog's body. He shows Judd the cemetery, and Spot comes back different. Not dangerous or anything, just dead-like. And he tells him the story of the Wendigo. And then Judd cries, because despite the excuse that he was just trying to pay back Louis for saving his wife, he knows it's actually because the burial ground has an influence on him. And that's why it bothers me that Norma gets cut out of both movie adaptations, because she's so important for Judd's motivation, and she's not in either movie. The family returns, and Ellie tells Louis that she had a dream that Church died. She greets Church, but she can tell he's different and doesn't want to be around him. Gage gets really sick, and Louis sleeps on the couch so Gage can take his spot. He wakes up to Rachel screaming, and Church is sitting on his chest and staring at him. Gage chokes on his own vomit, Louis saves him, and he doubles down on trying to keep the cat out of the house. They have Christmas, and Louis keeps finding disemboweled animals on the doorstep or in the garage. After Christmas, Norma passes. Rachel doesn't want to go to the funeral and opens up about her sister Zelda. Zelda suffered from spinal meningitis, and Rachel had to take care of her when she was 8. Zelda was sick and miserable, hateful towards Rachel. Rachel started wishing for her to die so her and her parents wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Then she dies when Rachel's parents are gone for Passover, starting to choke, and Rachel couldn't save her even when she tried. She suffered from nightmares for years that Zelda would come back for revenge and give her spinal meningitis. And of course she mentions her sister's love for the Wizard of Oz, particularly Oz the Great and Terrible, a phrase that gets repeated a lot. Louis and Ellie go to the funeral, and Ellie fully accepts that death is a part of life. And Louis reflects that the last happy day of his life was flying a kite with Gage. And that's the end of Chapter 1. Yeah, this book has 3 chapters that get broken up into parts, and the start of each chapter is a passage from the Bible when Jesus revives Lazarus, and below that for the second chapter is a quote from the Ramones. It's pretty cool that the Ramones are mentioned in the book, since they made the song for Pet Sematary. The second chapter starts with the funeral preparations for Gage, Steve trying to help Louis get it together for his wife and daughter. We get a flashback, where Gage is playing runaway from his parents towards the road just as a truck is coming. Lewis runs after him and launches forward, brushing his fingers against his jacket before the truck drags him forward. Rachel and Lewis attend the afternoon viewing, and Mr. Goldman drunkenly blames Lewis for what happened. They get into a fist fight where Gage's coffin gets knocked over, and Lewis just breaks down and cries. When putting Ellie to bed, she insists that God could bring Gage back, just like Jesus did for Lazarus. Lewis gets drunk and starts to really think about the Pet Sematary and how it brings back the dead, and Judd shows up right then. He tells him he knows what Lewis is thinking, and that he shouldn't. He tells the story of Timmy Baterman, a young man who died in World War II. After his dad Bill gets the body, people start seeing Timmy pacing back and forth on the road. Judd and his friends confront Bill, and Timmy starts exposing and mocking all of their deepest secrets, smelling like the grave and covered in maggots. 2 nights later, Bill sets the house on fire with both of them inside. Judd makes Lewis promise not to take Gage to the burial ground, but then Lewis has a vivid dream where Gage survives and swears that he'd do anything for a second chance. Lewis tells Rachel to take Ellie to Chicago to get out of the house and stay with her family, telling her he'd join them in a couple of days. She's suspicious he's hiding something, but he manages to convince her. She tells him that the man who ran over Gage tried to unalive himself. He wasn't drunk or anything. He just felt a pull to put his foot down on the pedal, influenced by the Pet Sematary. Rachel's dad calls and genuinely apologizes for his behavior. Rachel keeps trying to figure out what's wrong, and Ellie has a dream where Lewis dies. They fly back to Chicago, and Lewis starts getting ready to retrieve Gage's body. Ellie nearly throws up in the airport, and she tells her mother about someone named Paxcow trying to warn her in the Pet Sematary. Rachel realizes that she means Pascal, and that Ellie couldn't have possibly known about him. When she can't reach Lewis on the phone, she calls Judd, who promises to keep watch for Lewis when he comes back, even though he can feel the cemetery warning against it. Now the perspectives bounce back and forth. Rachel books several connecting flights to get to Ludlow as quickly as possible, just as Lewis is breaking into the cemetery where Gage was buried. Rachel misses her flight in Boston, and the guard suggests she rents a car. Lewis opens up Gage's coffin and smuggles the body back home. Rachel calls Judd, begging to tell her what's going on, but he swears he'll explain when she gets there. He's pulled into sleep just as Lewis pulls into his driveway. Lewis takes Gage through the Pet Sematary, seeing the face of the Wendigo, and buries Gage in the Micmac burial ground. Meanwhile, Rachel's car keeps malfunctioning despite it being brand new, like something's trying to keep her away. Lewis makes it back home and falls asleep, and a shadowy figure grabs a scalpel from his bag. Chapter 3 starts off with the usual Bible passage, as well as a quote from the monkey's paw. Judd jolts awake, knowing he didn't sleep naturally. He sees Church and goes to his drawer for a cleaver. Gage walks in and mocks his dead wife, even imitating her voice. Judd lunges at him, but Church trips him and holds down his legs. Gage stabs the scalpel through Judd's hand, and then repeatedly stabs him to death. Rachel gets her car fixed and arrives at Judd's house. She hears Judd moan upstairs, and when she opens the door, she sees Zelda, threatening to twist her back so she'll never get out of bed again. The face morphs into Gage, holding something behind his back, and she cries and hugs him. Lewis wakes up and spots the car across the road. He gets a call from Mr. Goldman asking if Rachel ever made it. He says yes, and Goldman tells him that they had to bring Ellie to the hospital for hysteria, saying the Oz the Great and Terrible killed her mother. The only other thing they could make out from Ellie was, Paxcow says it's too late. Lewis grabs up several syringes of morphine and heads across the road. He lures Church with food and injects him. He finds Judd's body and goes upstairs to find Rachel's. After breaking down, he injects Gage, collects Rachel's body, and sets the house on fire. Steve goes over to check on Lewis, follows what he thinks is Lou down the path to the Pet Sematary, and finds Lewis holding Rachel's body wrapped in a bedsheet, his hair turned white. He tries to get Steve to follow him into the burial ground, but he resists long enough for the cemetery to lose interest and runs, narrowly avoiding his fate. In the epilogue, Lewis has avoided the police questioning, wearing a hat and gloves to hide his white hair and bloody fingers. He's playing solitaire when the back door opens. Rachel puts her hand on his shoulder and delivers the final line throat full of dirt. Darling. I didn't realize that the breakdown was gonna be so long. I didn't finish the story the first time around because of the reading log time limit, but it had a deep impact on me. My own cat had just died over the summer, and Pet Sematary was oddly comforting to read. I've reread it a dozen times, and even just skimming over it for this video gave me chills. I made this clay thing for church and ceramics, though I did end up stepping on it by accident. I even made my older sister read it, as she doesn't usually like reading. Anyway, despite spoiling the whole plot, I'd still recommend reading it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider subscribing? Stay safe, and don't get buried in the pet cemetery. See you next time. Bye!